In the previous video we showed how the JS Populate dialog function takes a dot variable that defines some data and then generates a JavaScript set of JavaScript commands that would be used to populate the dialog. So now we're going to actually show a working example of how you might use that. So if you look at this dialog over here, you can see we have a dialog with first name, last name, age and married as controls at the top level of the dialog, and then in a repeating section we have address, type, address, city and state, and there's we've got those in a repeating section called container 1. And so now let's go back to our server-side onInitialize event over here, and then you can see that what we have in the onInitialize event is we have a dot variable that defines the data that we'd like to use to populate this dialog, and the format of this dot variable here is of course identical to the dot variable that we showed in the previous video. So going back to our example here, you can see that we're going to put first name and last name of John Smith, age of 23, married of true, and then we're defining underneath this dot variable, we're defining an array called container 1, and it's called container 1 because the ID of this repeating section is in fact container 1. So let's go back now, so we can see there, and inside this array here we've just defined one item called work, 36 Bigelow Street, Cambridge, Mass. Then we've called our helper function to generate the JavaScript for us, but the JavaScript that got generated is not a complete JavaScript response. We need to also, before we actually start populating the underbar D object, we need to actually declare it. So this first line dims that variable as a new object. Then we put in our code that actually populates underbar D, and this code here is generated by the helper function. And then finally we call the dialog object's populate method. So here we go, and now we've gone ahead and we've populated. So we go to working preview, and we can see there's John Smith, 23, and there's the first row in the repeating section. So if we were to go now and add another row to the repeating section, we'll see, let's go here and put home, and let's put this as 138 Harvard Street, and then go over to working preview now. And now we can see that there are two rows in our repeating section. So now let's go back to our repeating section and set the number of rows in the repeating section to, say, 1. So now we're going to have a problem because our repeating section by default has one row, but we've got two rows of data and we're not seeing the second repeating section row. And the reason is we did not emit the code that sets the repeating section row count. So if we were to just actually go here and put in a debug 1, we'll see that inside PJS there's another JavaScript command that sets the repeating section row count. So let's go now to working preview, and then let's go and examine PJS, and we can see here that there's a property there called set repeating section row count. So let's copy that variable and go back now to our JavaScript, and now let's also emit this in our JavaScript that we send back to the client. So the code that sets the repeating section count is inside this set repeating sections property, and so you can see here we're going to emit that as part of our JavaScript response. And now when we go over to working preview, we see that we have two rows in our repeating section, and there's the second row of data. So by using this helper function and by creating an Xbasic dot variable that contains the data with which we'd like to populate the dialog, you can see here that the code necessary to actually write a server-side event handler that populates a fairly complex dialog with repeating section data, etc., is actually simplified dramatically. Thanks very much.